Hello, everybody. This week, Jimmy is taking a break. So he's not going to be around for a couple of weeks, and you will have to just deal with me. This week, let's talk about some of the launches like Grok 4 and Microsoft Phi-4-mini-flash-reasoning. We'll also talk about a few things like, for example, Microsoft's own diagnostic orchestrator, like the medical superintelligence, the work that has been going at Microsoft AI, and we will talk about several news, this and more. Stay tuned for a quick intro. Greetings. Welcome to the AI Files podcast. If you're looking to stay up to date on the AI, this is the podcast for you. I'm Shadab Hussain. I'm the director of AI at Microsoft, and I'm your co host.
Hello, everybody. Jamie Basilico, as you know already. I'm the other co-host here for the AI Files. My day job is a data and AI technical specialist and architect. And as a reminder, please note this is not an official Microsoft channel, so the views and opinions expressed by myself and Shadab are our own and do not represent the views of Microsoft.
All right, let's talk about it. So this week for the AI Code of the Week, I will say that let's start with the one of the biggest news in the corporate landscape last week was Microsoft's layoffs, and there were 9,000 people who were actually let go. And of course, as you know, that we are also working at Microsoft. Both Jamie and I are fine, but some of our colleagues were let go. So it's pretty sad. But the thing that I want to actually clarify is there were several newspaper, which news outlet I would rather say, they had some of the misleading headlines, right? Not directly, but kind of give an illusion that the layoffs were actually as a direct result of the AI replacing the job. Now, that is not necessarily the case. Okay. The AI may certainly be contributing to it. However, it is a pivot to the, I would say, the restructuring in the way that you can sell more AI. But it's not that the roles itself were actually, for example, being replaced by the AI. For example, I'll tell you, like my own role is transforming. Earlier, I was doing only the data and AI, and now going forward, I will be actually responsible as a seller for the and we call that role as a specialist for the entire cloud. So not just data and AI, which means that not just the AI and fabric and database and the AI services as well as like data governance and etc. But now I'll be responsible for entire Azure, which means that infrastructure and apps. In fact, everybody earlier we used to have actually three specializations of the Azure. There was a data and AI, there was an infrastructure, we also called it core, and then there was something called apps innovation or digital. All of that now is combined into one role. Okay, so that actually allows more coverage in terms of you go super deep into few accounts, but then you also are covering more, right? From a personal point of view. um, I would say I would reserve my judgment on this one. I'm not too entirely sure that is what market wants. At this point of time, that this is what Microsoft is pivoting to. This is not the current model at AWS and Google, and we'll see. Time will tell whether this will be a successful change of the role. Remember, 5 years ago, or I think probably 7 years ago, something like that, there was only one role for the entire Azure. That time, cloud was still evolving, I would say, like in the previous decade. So one person was enough. But now, as we had more products being added, like on the app side, on the data and AI side, etc., you actually need more specialization at the front, and that's what this role does, specialize, right? So my role is a specialist role, which is actually at the front. It's a selling role. I'm responsible with the coda, but then also I'm also, of course, not a generic person. I do bring the certain depth to the conversations, and many time I can handle the conversation myself. The other time I will involve some of the technical specialists or the sales engineers, solution engineers, as we call it. So that's how so role is going to be evolving a little bit. Now, there were a lot of headlines like that okay, the AI is leading to the job losses. As I said, not directly, okay, not necessarily, and it is more like pivoting to the era of AI. So that's one part of it. The other thing is that, of course, I would say, for example, some of the roles are going to evolve, and that's part of the changing landscape. In fact, that's why we do this podcast as well, to make sure that people are aware of what's happening in the world out there, so you can transform your career, company, and community. Now, the thing is that Salesforce also said that they're basically 30% of the internal work at the company is being handled by AI, allowing it to reduce hiring for some roles. They will also be redeploying lots of folks as well. So it's important to understand that distinction. Sometimes it's a direct impact, sometimes it's an indirect impact, sometimes it's pivoting to the new reality, etc. Okay, let's move on to some of the rapid fire news. Okay, let's start with Ilya Sutskever. Will lead now the Safe Superintelligence following his CEO's exit. Well, Daniel Gross, who was actually his co-founder, he was a CEO, while Sutskever was more of a scientific officer. Now he's going to take charge. In fact, a few different roles. He will be the CEO. I think he will be the main research officer, and I think one more role that he will be doing. Remember, Saskiver's company, Safe Super Intelligence, does not have a product. It definitely has an ambition. It does not have a product which is out there that we know of, at least. And, a CEO leaving kind of raises question, right? In terms of, okay, if it is close to a viable product, why will CEO leave until there's a gross? No pun intended. Unless there is a gross misalignment between Saskiver and Daniel Gross. Anyway, moving on. On the other hand, Meta is also restructuring its AI unit under Superintelligence Lab. And by the way, Meta has been actually poaching lots of talent. And they got the Alexander Wong. Likely they were actually poaching Daniel Gross as well. They actually tried to take Elias Askewer as well, their company, but that didn't work. So, you know, they're also actually realigning some of their AI efforts, and now they're kind of forming this super intelligence labs. Remember, Yan LeCun actually also worked at Meta. He has been a bit silent, I would say, on the overall thing. Well, we'll see where how the things shake out there. But Meta has been on a purchasing spree of the talent. All right, let's talk about some of the other movement as well. Windsurf CEO is now headed to Google DeepMind, not to OpenAI. Yes, Varun Mohan. He is the CEO, and bunch of the talent will actually be moving to Google DeepMind. Now, Google is not exactly acquiring. They're not actually, acquiring this company. They're basically getting some non-exclusive licenses. However, they're basically a bunch of the team members will actually move. Windsor will continue to operate, but the bunch of them will actually move to Google DeepMind. And of course, this happened after the deal between OpenAI and Windsor fell apart. That didn't go through, and we don't know. There there are lots of rumors out there that it was because of the Microsoft's exclusive access to the all the IP that OpenAI owns. That would actually was creating a tussle between Microsoft and OpenAI. We don't know exactly. There's nothing, no official word on this one. But anyway, that's what happened. In the other news, Linda Yaccarino, who was actually heading the X, has also resigned. And remember, X is now part of XAI. So we don't know what's happening, because in the meantime, XAI also actually launched Grok 4. And there was some issues with it. However, this kind of, I think people movement generally is not immediately felt. I think these are generally things which takes time, and they may be work in progress for a while. On the other hand, the Replit, a company that actually provides agentic coding platform, where you can actually use the AI agents to actually do the coding. It is also a platform for a lot of students who actually learn the programming. It has partnered with Microsoft. So now what that means is that essentially you can actually, like Replit's platform, you can actually purchase through the Azure marketplace. And if you have a Mac, which is Microsoft Azure Commit to Consume agreement, and you get certain discounts, so that means that it also goes against. Remember, in order to get better discounts, you commit to this commit to spend, which is called Microsoft Azure commit to consume, Mac, and you get more discounts, but then you're also liable. So if you don't consume that within certain period of time, then you are anyway ending up paying. So many time it is good to actually buy things from the marketplace, which is what the Azure marketplace is. So Rapidlet is now going to be available from that, and Rapidlet, what it has done is it has actually done some close integrations with the Azure platform. So for example, like the clusters and the apps, etc., those are now closely aligned with the Rapidlet. So it can actually work very closely with those Azure products. All right. Moving on, we also had some of the political moves there. So US Senate actually overwhelmingly voted 99-1 to remove the controversial AI moratorium from the budget bill, the big, beautiful bill. So, what happened was that essentially, as part of this, there was a provision in which the states were going to be barred for 10 years from introducing any regulation related to AI. And of course, the AI company like OpenAI and others were actually supportive of that. They don't want too many regulations happening at the state level, right? They just want to work with the federal authority. So that was a provision that Ted Cruz had introduced. However, that has been now bipartisanly, I would say, like pretty overwhelmingly, everybody kind of rejected that to be included in the big, beautiful bill. Um, Authors also have been calling on publishers to limit their use of AI. So there were like bunch of authors, renowned authors, who actually wrote an open letter to the publishers to say that, look, you know, do not limit your use of AI. So, for example, if you're creating audiobooks, hire humans. Don't just use the AI platform, because we are not being paid for those AI which are being trained, right? I mean, as you know, a lot of content providers are still fighting that battle. So, what happens is, they're saying that, look, don't use that, right? Retain humans, because anyway, we are not getting paid. So, we need to balance this equation. And lots of different authors have actually also added their signature to it. I think it's getting popular. It is something, I would say, it's a growing kind of AI resistance, or resistance to AI, because there is still inequality in this world, right? There are, of course, models being trained and not giving the dues to the content owners or providers, etc. So it's a world which is still sorting things out, right? And on that regard, Cloudflare, the company that provides a lot of networking security product, they've actually launched a marketplace which lets websites charge the AI bots for scraping. So for example, if you have it, if you're trying to scrape that website, you will have to pay for the crawl, and otherwise you will be blocked. So it's a preview feature right now. They've launched this in an experimentative mode, but I think it's going to probably get popular, because it allows the companies to monetize or entirely block, or continue to block the scrapers, from using their content. So that also actually could become a kind of a template going forward on how the companies will monetize their content, etc., as well. All right. In the meantime, Denmark is actually trying to clamp down on the deep fakes by letting people copyright their own features. So, for example, they not just like the explicit images, but Denmark is working on a regulation which will basically allow for anybody to actually, like, not just non-explicit images, anything which basically their body can become the image of the body becomes copyrightable, right, in their own features. So it cannot be created as a deepfake, imagining any scenarios. All right, let's talk about some of the launches. So Grok 4. Okay, that was one of the big launch that happened. It was launched by, of course, the Elon Musk team. They have actually launched this new model, supposedly Superintelligence. It has been marketed as the smartest AI in the world. It is trying to target and compete against the OpenAI GPT-5 upcoming, and then the Google's Gemini. It basically talks about some of the benchmark, like for example, humanities last exam, Grok 4 has actually scored 25.4%, and Grok 4 Heavy, which is another variation, scored actually 44.4%, which basically, is ahead of the competition, right? It's the latest model, so it is expected every time a latest model comes to the market, they are always claiming to be better. Now, it has certain features and innovation, like of course, it has multimodal capabilities. It can process text and images. It has voice mode with British accent. It has deep search or the real time search. It can do it. It has modular architecture, kind of collaborative agents. And then, of course, there are a bunch of roadmap. Now, standard Grok 4 is basically $30 a month. You can also use Super Grok Heavy plan, which is basically $300 per month with early access to heavy version and the premium features. Um, of course, any Grok or anything Elon Musk is not free of any controversy and the criticism. So there are reports of Grok 4 searching Musk's own X post before responding. Essentially, it is trying to reflect, it is trying to validate against whatever Musk's own ideology is. That's of course one of the controversy. It has also been reported as having some anti-Semitic and extremist outputs, which basically are also not acceptable. And of course, they've also apologized for some of these behavior, etc. But primarily, Grok 4, while we were told that it is not going to be politically correct, it is not going to be, it doesn't mean that it's fair and balanced. It's essentially reflecting Musk's own ideology, right? And whatever he believes in, because it people when they found in the release the reasoning logs that it kind of checks whatever Musk has said in the past, right? So it's not going against that. Anyway, I think enough controversy that happen every time that there's something happening in Grok 4. Let's move on. Let's talk about the Azure and the Microsoft section. So a couple of weeks ago, and we did not do a version actually. We did not do an episode recording last week because it was a pretty short week, July 4. Hopefully, everybody had a good time. Overwhelming, and not too much was happening that week, honestly, other than Microsoft layoffs. So let's talk about some of the medical superintelligence. So Microsoft AI team, which is led by Mustafa Suleiman, it's doing actually some amazing thing, building some new solutions and models, etc. They have actually created what they call as a path to medical superintelligence, right? So there are a couple of things that they actually talked about. For example, we they what happens typically in the US scenario, there is an exam called USMLE. Okay. Every person, every doctor who has to practice has to clear that exam. It's a rigorous exam. You have to essentially demonstrate clinical knowledge, the treatment knowledge, and full medical knowledge before you can actually be granted a license to practice. Okay. Now, that exam, um, however, AI has become too smart to actually pass it, and it gets near perfect score on that exams already. Now, that exam is based on the multi-choice, objective, etc., questions, and not necessarily the best way to judge an AI use, right? Now, what Microsoft has done is they have actually created a kind of a new benchmark, basically, which is based on diagnostic accuracy. And that accuracy is based on, there is a journal, New England Journal. What it does is it basically publishes different or complicated cases every week and how the diagnosis has been arrived, right? So now, if the AI can achieve the same level of efficiency and accuracy, that actually will be very beneficial, right? And so we're going to be more practical. So what this benchmark does is what the Microsoft is calling as a SD bench, which is basically sequential diagnosis benchmark, SD bench. It transformed 304 recent New England Journal of Medicine cases into stepwise diagnostic encounters where models or human physicians can iteratively ask questions and order tests. As the new information becomes available in that turn, The model or clinician, they can update their reasoning and they gradually narrow towards a final diagnosis, right? So it's like back and forth, right? And then, but it what it also does is not just the accuracy, it also tracks the cost, like a virtual cost, essentially. Now, of course, the test is against the documented cases, which means that the model or the AI or the human can actually order some tests, and these tests are available, etc., already, and then those information will be provided. It's basically a simulation of how it should work out in the future. Now, this um, I would say the what they did is against this benchmark, Microsoft actually created a solution called Diagnostic Orchestrator, Microsoft AI Diagnostic Orchestrator to be precise, MAI-DXO. Now it's a system. What it does is it basically emulate a virtual panel of physicians, right? So remember, there is a physician, there could be a specific expert. There are different kind of physicians. They have very specific expertise, and many times in the diagnosis, you actually have to consult the number of physicians, right? So in the complicated cases, so it could involve multiple specialists, for example. So similarly, what this orchestrator does is it actually works with different models. Different models could be, the GPT, of course, model, the Llama, Claude, Gemini, Grok, and DeepSeek, and then it creates different agents. It could be like, for example, hypothesis agent, right? Or it could be a DX orchestrator. Let me show actually the screen here to show you what and how it looks like. Now, if you see here, you can see this is the chart of how this orchestrates, right? So the bunch of agents here is stewardship agent, checklist agent, test chooser agent, hypothesis agent, etc. And then this orchestrator can use any model, and it can use different model for different agents as well, and for like whatever they're good at. And then it does essentially, it asks questions for the question, it can request a test, and then it can provide a diagnosis. It also does the cost analysis, as you can see here. So this is, and then it basically gets tested against the SD bench framework, right? That I already talked about. Now, this is very, very interesting. What happens is then the it basically analyzes the best performing setup was found as when the diagnostic orchestrator was paired with OpenAI's O3, which correctly solved 85.5% of the benchmark cases. What is mind blowing is that the same task, the the physicians, 21 practicing physicians from the US and UK, each with 5 to 20 years of clinical experience, they could only achieve a mean accuracy of 20% across completed cases. That's too low, which means that 80% of the cases were going misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed. That's a remarkable improvement. Who would not want that? Now, of course, this orchestrator, etc., and the solution is right now not in the public preview. This is still being tested, etc. But also remember that the human physicians, they were not given any help from the AI, right? So they were on their own. It's basically raw human performance. Typically, conventionally, what happens today. This is fantastic because if you see, look at this chart, this my DXO, how it works, right? The cost will increase, and at some point, it is reaching that 85.5% accuracy. So as you can see, the cost will increase, and it is reaching at some point 85.5%, right? It is using the instant answer, it is using the question only, it is increasing the budget. But this is a you can see this chart actually showing the average cost of diagnostic test per case and then diagnostic accuracy. So mind blowing. Now, if these models we talked about, GPT, Llama, and Claude, and Gemini, if they were all on their own, they were underperforming. O3 seems to be the best so far among all the different models, even against the Claude for Opus and Gemini 2.5 Pro. It was able to achieve pretty good, like almost close to 80%. But the costs were a bit higher. And cost is important when you talk about the US healthcare. So this is actually remarkable and it is really, really promising. To be honest, if I have a doctor appointment this week, I'm going to actually ask my doctor, are you using AI yet or not? If not, then I would like to know why not. Because while I'm not comfortable only AI doing all the work or diagnosis, I want the human and AI to work together. That is important because I don't want my cases, and we've seen the example in my own personal life where many times we have been misdiagnosed. In fact, operated upon for a misdiagnosis. That got to change. This is not an excuse there where we continue to be subjective to a specific person's mood or ego or the competence. We got to have better diagnosis. All right. So I'm going to actually play out a video here which talks about this, how this entire thing works. It's a pretty short, like 2.5 kind of minute video, and you will see the details. Okay. Let's play it out.
Hi, I'm Xiao Liu, a physician scientist in the health team at Microsoft AI, and I'm going to take you through our sequential diagnosis benchmark. So these are cases from the New England Journal of Medicine's case proceedings, which are some of the most challenging cases to clinicians around the world. This one is of a 29-year-old woman with peritonsillar swelling and bleeding. And in our benchmark, we have two agents having a conversation. One is our gatekeeper agent, which has information about the case, and it can release it when it's requested in terms of diagnostic tests or aspects of the patient history. Then we have the Microsoft AI Diagnostic Orchestrator. That's our diagnostic agent, and its role is to try and work out what's going on with a patient. So the diagnostic agent starts by asking questions and trying to get a bit more of history about the patient's presenting complaints, history of fever, night sweats, medications, and so on. And it will do this for a few turns until it builds an impression of what's going on, and then it will start to suggest potential diagnoses. So we can see that the top 3 diagnoses at the moment seem to be bleeding disorders, and the diagnostic agent then goes ahead and starts requesting blood tests. And this is going to help it exclude some of its top differentials or confirm them. And as it does this, we see that we also get an estimate of what these diagnostic tests will cost. And we'll see this go up as the diagnostic agent asks for more tests, and we get some positive ones here that are abnormal. And as it does so, it will also change its thinking about what the most likely diagnosis is now. And so we see it go through this after requesting a few different tests. And what we then see is that it seems to change tact. So here now it's asking for a CT scan of the neck, and the diagnoses that it's considering at the top are no longer bleeding disorders, but are actually blood vessel malformations or tumors. And in the CT scan, we do actually see that there is a mass on the right side near the tonsils. So now the diagnostic model, the diagnostic agent, knows that it needs to request a biopsy of this mass to get a definitive diagnosis. And so it goes ahead and requests an endoscopic biopsy, and we see that there are tumor cells in the sample. So now it makes a final diagnosis of an embryonal rhabdomyosarcoma, which is an extremely rare form of a tumor of the muscle that occurs in about 1 in every 300,000 people. And it gets the answer correct.
All right. I think that's a pretty good story. Now, let's look at another quick announcement as well from Microsoft, which is basically Phi-4-mini-flash-reasoning. It's a new model. It's the latest addition to the Microsoft Phi model family. It is designed for resource constrained environments like edge devices and mobile apps. It offers up to 10 times higher throughput and 2 to 3 times lower latency than its predecessor, which was Phi-4 mini. Now, this is based on new architecture. It is something called decoder hybrid decoder design called Samba Y, and it has like something called gated memory units. It's for efficient layer communication. Um, Pretty good performance, and it still has like 64K token context length. Pretty good, 3.8 billion parameters, just like previous version as well. It is fine tuned on high quality synthetic data, It outperforms Phi-4 Mini and even larger models in latency and the long context tasks. So, pretty good models if you're using the Phi family. I would definitely recommend because Phi models have been generally pretty good. There are a lot of published case studies available where companies are actually using it for pretty good benefits. All right. Now, I think this week we have decided that we are going to restrict our episode generally to 30 minutes because we want to keep it very short so that people do not have to spend a lot of time every week. 30 minutes a week is, I think, something minimal, I would say, people should do, spend, and continue to track. Our podcast, we will continue to focus on finding the most relevant items which are meaningful to you to transform your career, company, and the community. Okay. With that, let's end it here and we'll talk next week again. Bye, everyone.